Her name was Emily Carter. At first glance, she was just like any other young woman. Smiling eyes, a quiet voice, and a heart full of dreams. She lived in a small apartment on the edge of town, worked part-time while studying, and believed, as many do in their early 20s, that love could fix anything. Emily met Nathan Reed during her first semester at university. He was charming in that dangerous kind of way, smart, unpredictable, and always surrounded by people. He wasn't perfect, but he made her feel like she was the only person in the world who mattered. And for a girl who grew up without much attention or affection, that feeling was everything. They fell in love fast. The kind of love that blinds you, consumes you, makes you believe in forever, even when the signs say be careful. Late night walks, dreams about their future, whispered promises of always being together. Emily lived in those moments, unaware of what was waiting ahead. She never imagined that the person who once traced constellations on her skin would be the same one to leave scars so deep they'd take years to heal. Because betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the one you trust most. The one who holds your heart, and then lets it fall. And this story, her story, is not just about heartbreak. It's about survival. About how you rise when the person you loved the most becomes the very reason you fell. It all started like in a romantic movie. Emily was late for her first philosophy lecture, and the only available seat was next to a guy with short, dark hair and a sharp, almost X-ray-like gaze. He looked at her, barely smiled, and said, "You're exactly 11 minutes late. But I guess it's worth it." It embarrassed her, but at the same time, it intrigued her. That's how they met. Nathan was the complete opposite of her, confident, loud, with a sharp sense of humor, and an inner self-assurance that made people either admire him or hate him. He always knew how to say something that would stick in your mind for a long time. He was a year older than her, studying journalism, and already had his own audience in the university newspaper. He wrote sharp pieces about politics, society, and everything that sparked debates. He had a reputation as the rebel with a mission. She was drawn to his energy. He knew how to listen, and when she talked about her fears, her loneliness, he didn't laugh. He would say, "You're not alone. I'm here now." She believed him because he always showed up when things were at their worst. When things weren't going well with her parents, when she failed an exam, when a friend betrayed her, Nathan was there, with chocolate, coffee, a movie, and with hugs that felt like the safest place in the world. Their relationship developed quickly. After just 2 months, she was spending almost every night at his place. Although she officially lived in the dorm, they made breakfast together, studied, shared their plans for the future. He talked about wanting to make a documentary about social injustice, and she dreamed of going to Europe. They were young, in love, and it seemed like the whole world was at their feet. But over time, cracks began to appear. At first, they were barely noticeable. One evening, she wrote to a friend she hadn't seen in weeks, saying she wanted to go to a cafe with her. Nathan was quietly packing his things in the kitchen. When she came back, he simply said, "I wonder why you want to spend time with people who don't even appreciate you instead of being with me." At the time, it seemed logical to her. He was just worried, but her friend stopped writing after that. Then came the jokes, seemingly harmless, but strange. "You're so naive, it's good I'm here, because without me, you'd have drowned in this world long ago," he would say with a smile. She laughed, but something inside her clenched. Once, when she woke up earlier than him, Emily saw Nathan sleeping, clutching her phone in his hands. The screen was off, but the fingerprints on the glass showed that he hadn't just been holding it. She quietly took the phone without waking him, and went into the settings. The call history, browser history, even notes, everything had been checked. But the strangest part was that there was a new note. "Don't trust them. Trust me, I'm all you need." She dismissed it, telling herself that maybe she had written it in an emotional outburst. But the handwriting, even the style, it wasn't hers. She deleted the note without saying anything, and for a long time, she felt something cold and invisible creeping up her spine. Over time, he started interfering with her clothing choices. "Why are you wearing that? Don't you want other people to stare at you?" he said, when she was getting ready for a party with classmates. At first, she protested. Then she just stopped going to parties. She didn't notice how she went from being an active, open, independent girl to becoming silent, cautious, and anxious. Her world had shrunk to one man, but she didn't see it, because he was the love of her life, because he wanted only the best, because he cared. He knew how to apologize so sincerely that her heart melted. When one time she cried after an argument, he hugged her, knelt down, whispered, "I'm sorry, I'm just afraid of losing you. You're all I have." And she believed him, because she wanted to believe, because everyone wants to be loved, even if that love comes with a hint of control. It all started, like in a romantic movie. Emily was late for her first philosophy lecture, and the only free seat was next to a guy with short dark hair and an intense, almost X-ray gaze. He looked at her, smiled faintly, and said, "You're exactly 11 minutes late. But I guess it's worth it." It embarrassed her, but at the same time, it intrigued her. That's how they met. Nathan was her complete opposite. Confident, loud, with a sharp sense of humor, and an inner self-assurance that made people either admire him or hate him. He always knew how to say something that would stick in your mind for a long time. He was a year older, studying at the journalism faculty, and already had his own audience at the university newspaper. He wrote sharp texts about politics, society, and everything that sparked debate. And he had a reputation as a rebel with a mission. She was drawn to his energy. He knew how to listen, and when she talked about her fears, her loneliness, he didn't laugh. He said, "You're not alone. I'm here now." She believed him because he always showed up when things were at their worst. When her relationship with her parents was falling apart, when she failed an exam, when a friend betrayed her, Nathan was there. With chocolate, coffee, and a movie, and with hugs that felt like the safest place in the world. Their relationship developed quickly. After 2 months, she was staying at his place almost all the time, even though she officially lived in a dorm. They cooked breakfasts together, studied, shared plans for the future. He talked about wanting to make a documentary about social injustice, and she dreamed of traveling to Europe. They were young, in love, and it seemed like the whole world was at their feet. But over time, cracks began to appear. At first they were almost imperceptible. One evening, she wrote to a friend she hadn't seen in weeks, saying she wanted to go to a cafe with her. Nathan was silently packing things in the kitchen. When she returned, he simply said, "I wonder why you want to spend time with people who don't even appreciate you, instead of being with me." At that moment, it seemed logical to her. He was just concerned, but the friend never wrote again. Then came jokes, seemingly harmless but strange. "You're so naive. It's good I'm around, because without me you'd have drowned in this world by now," he would say with a smile. She laughed, but something inside her clenched. One day, when she woke up before him, Emily saw Nathan sleeping with her phone in his hand. The screen was off, but the fingerprints on the glass showed that he hadn't just held it. She quietly took the device, without waking him, and checked the settings. The recent calls, browser history, even notes. Everything had been viewed. But the strangest thing was that a new note had appeared. "Don't trust them, trust me. I'm all you need." She told herself it was something she might have written in an emotional moment. But the handwriting, even the style, it wasn't hers. She deleted the note without saying anything. And for a long time she felt something cold and invisible creeping up her spine. Over time, he began interfering with her clothes. "Why are you wearing that? Do you want others to stare at you?" he would say when she was getting ready for a party with classmates. At first, she protested. Then she just stopped going to parties. She didn't notice how she went from being an active, open, independent girl, to being quiet, cautious, and anxious. Her world shrank to one man, but she didn't see it, because he was the love of her life, because he only wanted what was best, because he cared. He knew how to apologize so sincerely that her heart melted. When one time she cried after a fight, he hugged her, got on his knee, whispered, "I'm sorry, I'm just afraid of losing you. You're all I have." And she believed him, because she wanted to believe, because everyone wants to be loved, even if that love has a taste of control. The first real blow wasn't physical. It was moral, sudden, deafening, like a gunshot in the silence. It happened on the day when Emily decided to go for an internship interview at a well-known company. It was a chance. Her dream job. A new start. A breath of freedom. She told Nathan only after receiving the invitation she was afraid he would reject it at the idea stage. And she wasn't wrong. Are you out of your mind? You think you can manage this and a relationship? This is the end of our peace, he said. Not raising his voice, but every word cut. He remained silent for 2 days, and then at night, when she had barely fallen asleep, he whispered, "You'll do what you decide, but don't be surprised if I'm not around anymore." Despite the fear, she went to the interview, and it went well. Very well. They told her they were expecting her on Monday. When she returned home, he wasn't there. The phone was off. The apartment was empty. For the first time she slept alone, feeling guilty, but at the same time, relieved. However, the next morning everything returned to normal. She came back, hugged her as if nothing had happened. "I just needed to think. Everything's fine. The most important thing is that you understand what matters." She didn't understand. But she didn't argue. She turned down the internship. She told the employer she couldn't. And she cried all night. In the following weeks, something in him began to change. He came home later. More often he would leave the room when he received messages. She asked what was happening, but in response, she heard, "Don't you trust me? It's work. Or you. Choose." And one day, she accidentally saw a conversation on his phone. The name, Sarah, New York. The messages were explicit. The photos even more so. And the most painful thing, he hadn't deleted them. They just lay there. As if he wasn't hiding anything. Because he no longer feared losing her. Because he was sure she wouldn't leave. When she, trembling, asked him about it, he laughed. "Are you really taking this seriously? It's just flirting. I'm with you. Isn't that enough?" For the first time, she felt something dying inside her. Not immediately. Not with an explosion. But like slow rust eating from within. For the first time, she didn't respond. For the first time, she didn't cry. She just silently stared out the window. That night, she had a dream. She stood in an empty room. There were no windows on the walls, just black mirrors, in each a reflection, but the faces were different. One was smiling, another bruised, the third empty like a doll. And suddenly, they all started whispering. "You knew, you allowed it. You are weak." She woke up with a scream. Nathan didn't react. He just turned to the other side. Didn't even ask what had happened. It wasn't just a nightmare, it was a call. An inner one. She began recording her dreams. Drawing. Her hands instinctively created crooked figures, shadows, phrases she had never said aloud. Her mind was searching for a way to speak. Anyway, sometimes, she talked to herself. In the bathroom. Whispering. Asking, "How much longer? Why am I afraid? Why am I here?" And then she wiped her tears and smiled in front of the mirror, so that, God forbid, he wouldn't suspect that something still lived inside her. From that moment on, Emily began to change. She no longer asked when he disappeared. She didn't touch him when he went to bed. She walked the streets aimlessly, watching people, listening to strangers' conversations, and felt that her life wasn't hers, that she was an actress who played herself in a bad movie. One evening, she sat on a bench in the park, and heard a couple laughing nearby, and that laughter broke her. For the first time in a long while, she cried. Not because of him, but because of herself, because of what she had become. That was the first internal break, not final.
But the most important.
Because that evening, she thought for the first time, maybe I've already lost myself, but can I find myself again? Emily woke up at 4 in the morning. The night still dominated outside, and the house was enveloped in silence, which she felt not with her ears, but with her heart. It was not just silence. It was farewell. She knew. She would never return here. No looking back. No doubt. All her belongings had already been packed. Only one large suitcase, an old backpack, and a small box of mementos remained: a childhood photo, her journal, a letter from her mom. Everything else was left behind. She even threw away her favorite mug, the one she had bought with Nathan on their first weekend together. Everything that reminded her of them no longer mattered. She left a short note on the table. No tears, no explanations, just one sentence: "I'm no longer with you because I started choosing myself." But something went wrong. Everything teetered on the edge of failure. The moment Emily stepped out of the house and turned the corner, her heart suddenly stopped. Across the street by the grocery store was Nathan's car. She froze. He never left so early. Maybe he just forgot something. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Or maybe he suspected something. Emily immediately crouched behind a trash container. Her heart was pounding like a drum. Her fingers were trembling, and her head was spinning. She remembered how he had slammed the door so hard once that it almost came off the hinges, just because she went to the store without telling him. If he saw her now, it would all be over, and maybe much worse than before. She pulled out her phone, typed a message to the taxi driver with trembling fingers: "Meet me at the end of the street, a bit farther," and ran in the other direction. This brief scene could have ruined everything, but once again, she managed to escape. When she left the house, she paused for a moment by the door. She looked at the windows, and somewhere, deep in her consciousness, she expected him to come out, stop her, say something. But no, Nathan was asleep. As always, deeply, carefree, and perhaps even thinking about another woman. She turned and walked away. The taxi was waiting around the corner. The driver didn't ask anything. He just helped with the suitcase and drove toward the station. The city was still asleep, but in her head, a new day began to dawn, and for the first time in many months, she breathed in the air, as if her lungs had relearned how to work, freely, without fear, without control. The train left at 6:10. She watched the window, and the landscapes changed like fragments of the past, slowly disappearing, leaving only a trace in her mind. When the city was behind, she cried. Not from pain, not from regret, but from relief. From the fact that she survived, that she could, that she broke free. She went to a small town, one she had only heard about on forums, those where women shared stories of escape. There, she found a cheap room in a shelter for survivors of violence. She didn't want to admit that she had become part of such a category, but reality was stubborn. Yes, she had suffered. Yes, it was violence. Psychological, slow, no bruises, but broken inside. The first days she hardly spoke. She either slept, or sat in a corner of the common room, listening to the other women. Some had lost everything, fleeing from fists. Some, from control and humiliation. They were different, but they all shared one thing: they had escaped. And now, they all lived with the same question: who am I without him? Emily began to heal. Slowly. In small steps. She signed up for therapy. She started keeping a journal. For the first time in many years, she allowed herself to drink coffee when she wanted. Not when it was convenient. Small victories, but they were her own, and each of them was a step toward her true self. One morning, as she brushed her teeth in front of the mirror, she saw herself and smiled. No irony, no mask. For the first time, she still had pain, she still had scars, but there was no more fear. And then she understood. Freedom is not in running away. Freedom is when you stop being afraid to live on your own terms. Emily woke up in the morning, feeling that her new life was just beginning. She had trouble falling asleep, as her thoughts tangled between new plans and old fears. It was a night without dreams. The silence in the room felt like hope, the dawn promising a future. She was once again alone, with her emotional pain, but it wasn't as terrifying as before. The first weeks in the small town felt like euphoria. She started attending therapy sessions. At first, it was difficult. She felt that each conversation, each revealed memory, was a blow to what little strength she had left. But with each subsequent session, Emily slowly started breaking down her walls, one by one. At first completely, then bit by bit. She didn't want to see herself as a victim, but she couldn't ignore the truth. This was violence. Slow, psychological. No visible bruises, but deep wounds inside. Her therapist had his own method. He said that in order to change her life, she had to begin by understanding herself, her emotions, and fears. So they worked on helping Emily realize that she wasn't to blame for what had happened. She had lived with self-blame for many years, convincing herself that her problems were her own fault. "You deserve this." Nathan's voice echoed in her head every time she felt weak. Now Emily began to understand that these were just manipulations. She didn't deserve to be humiliated and broken. Step by step, from one session to the next, her life started to change. At first it was subtle. She stopped crying every night. She started writing letters. Although she had once thought that words could no longer bring her relief, the letters were not addressed to specific people. They were monologues, reflections, farewells to the past, and promises to herself that she would find the strength to start over. Every morning, she wrote her feelings, but the main thing became this: "I deserve better." Those words became the manifesto of her new life. Every day she changed little things, new habits, new places. She went for a walk, instead of staying at home. She bought a new bag, something she had never allowed herself before. She took up yoga and painting classes. Her heart began to feel emotions again, to sense the world beyond stress and pain. But most importantly, she had learned to smile again. At first it was barely noticeable, but with each time, it became bigger and more genuine. Amidst all this ordinary life, Emily began to notice something she had never imagined before. She started dreaming again. Not about surviving, but about building her future. Filled with purpose and inspiration, she began planning what she wanted to do next: find a new job, go on a trip, change her surroundings. She even started thinking about going back to university to finish her education, which had been left unfinished because she had remained in Nathan's shadow. Her true self was still unknown to her. Meanwhile, life in the small town, though not easy, allowed her to start meeting new people. At first these were small conversations with neighbors or in the store. They were kind, simple, and didn't delve into the depth of her personal history, and that was important. She wasn't ready to open up to everyone, but one day she met James, a young man who had just returned from another city. He didn't ask questions, he was simply there, if she needed someone to talk to. And even though it sounded strange, he didn't need to know anything about her past to be a good friend. He saw in her more than just a woman who had suffered violence. He saw a person who had been able to rise and start everything over. Emily began to feel that her world was finally becoming whole. She was no longer just the one who escaped. She was the one who found the strength to live for herself, who restored her dignity and the ability to be happy. But by then she already knew one thing: true freedom was not just about escaping from pain, but about realizing that you can create your own reality. And she began to do that. Emily still didn't fully understand why, but one day her gaze stopped at an ad in the local newspaper. She had been feeling changes within herself for a few weeks, and at that moment, it seemed like a sign. A volunteer organization was looking for people to support victims of domestic violence, offering help through therapeutic meetings and support groups. At first she wasn't sure if she was ready to open her soul to other people's stories, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized that this could be the next step on her path to complete recovery. After some contemplation, she called the number listed. At the other end of the line, a woman's voice warmly asked about her desire to join. Emily remembered how she herself had needed help, how important it had been to find someone who could not only listen, but also help her see the light at the end of the tunnel, and now she could be the one to do that for others. That same day, she went to her first meeting with the support group. All the women there had gone through similar hardships, and although each of them had their own unique story, their pain was shared. The pain of betrayal, the painful process of forgiveness, the desire to change life after the horrors that had left deep marks on their souls. For each of these women, This moment was difficult. But with every word and every response to the painful moments, Emily felt that she was not alone. Soon she realized that helping others had become her own therapeutic process. She didn't just listen to others' stories, she began giving advice based on her own experience. Emily shared how she had dealt with her pain, and how, though it was hard, she had made herself move forward. Her words weren't empty because she spoke from the heart. She didn't have a magic formula that would immediately heal their souls, but her experience became a light for others amidst the darkness. This wasn't just a way to help, it was her own recovery. At first she asked herself, how can I help when I don't feel fully healed myself? But over time, she realized that this very process helped her grow. Every story, every response, every grateful look inspired her to take new steps. She began to feel her inner strength, which had been hidden under layers of pain. In the support group, she wasn't just a participant, she became an important part of it. Her words inspired others, and her story gave them hope. In each of them she saw herself, and this helped her understand that not everything was lost. She respected every step they took on the road to recovery, and although she continued her journey, now she knew that this path was important not only for her but for those around her. One day, after a meeting, one of the participants approached her shyly smiling, and said, I know you dared to take a step forward, but I don't know if I can do it. Emily took her hand, and responded, as if it were the simplest phrase, you can Bane, and even if it's hard, remember that no one has the right to decide when you should be ready, you decide when it's your time. These words stayed with her for a long time. They reminded her that her experience and story weren't just her personal journey but an opportunity to become part of something bigger. Now, she understood that she could be the important link that connects victims of violence and gives them the strength to begin anew. It wasn't an easy path, but it was what helped her find true purpose and meaning. What she had feared, losing her identity, and having no future, had become her greatest gift. Through helping others, she realized that her path to healing would never end, but would continue in every word of support, in every glance, in every story she would hear. A few months after Emily started actively helping others, she realized that her relationship with the past was still unresolved. Although she had already felt that she was beginning to heal, there was a sense that something was still left undone. An unknown emptiness in her soul kept her restless. Over time, Emily realized that this emptiness was connected to her old grudges and the unforgiveness she carried inside. Her ex-husband, Nathan, was the person she had loved most in her life. Their story was complicated, but in her memory, she always held on to the best moments of their relationship. Their first dates, laughter at parties, their first vacation together. These were the moments when they were happy, when everything seemed possible and bright. But these moments couldn't overshadow the pain of what happened later. Despite all the hardships she went through after the divorce, and how circumstances had changed her life, Emily understood that she could not move forward until she resolved the invisible thread between herself and her past. She couldn't go on holding on to grudges because it was as if she was trapping herself in the past, not allowing herself to fully step out of the shadow of old wounds. One day, during meditation, she suddenly realized that all she needed was to forgive Nathan, not for his sake, but for hers. She understood that holding on to anger toward him meant holding on to that anger within herself, which affected her mental state and overall sense of well-being. She could have held on to the grudge for a long time, but it would only intensify the pain and delay her healing process. She decided it was time to take this important step, to reach out to Nathan. At first, she wasn't sure if it was the right step. She was afraid it might open old wounds, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized that it wasn't just about reconciliation with him, it was reconciliation with her own past, and the pain she had carried for so long. Emily wrote him a letter. She didn't know what he would reply, or if he was ready for such a conversation. She had no expectations, but in her heart, there was hope that this step would bring her peace.
She wrote about how much time had passed, how she realized she needed to let go of the painful moments to move forward. She apologized for anything she might have done wrong, and admitted that she had tried to handle the trauma on her own, but now, she was ready to forgive. That evening, she received his reply. It was short but warm. Nathan, admitting that he had regretted what had happened for a long time, thanked her for finding the strength to reach out to him. He said he was also trying to come to terms with what had happened, and that he was ready to support her on the road to recovery, if needed. This message became an important moment for her. She realized that reconciliation didn't mean returning to the past, but it symbolized that she no longer allowed old grudges and pain to define her future. She felt that she had managed to let go of what had weighed on her soul for so long. This step was crucial for her emotional healing, and gave her the sense that she was once again taking control of her life. Reconciliation with the past is not always about mutual forgiveness. It is, first and foremost, about inner liberation. Emily realized that she should not leave unnecessary pain in her heart. She was ready to move on. And now, having let go of everything that had kept her stuck, her journey toward true healing could begin on a new, stronger level. Emily realized that all her struggles, hardships, and disappointments had not only become part of her story, but also important lessons on the path to inner growth. The traumas she had endured had changed her, and although they had been painful, they had also become the foundation for her recovery and transformation. Now, having reconciled with her past and freed herself from old grudges, she felt that it was time for a new beginning. This journey of self-healing and forgiveness became an important step in her life. Emily was no longer the person carrying painful memories in her heart, living with them every day. She had learned not only to forgive others, but also to forgive herself. She accepted her weaknesses, mistakes, and decisions that had been part of her path. Now, she felt stronger because she understood that there was no need to burden her heart with the weight of pain that no longer had the power to control her life. Emily was ready to move on. She had found her true calling, and by helping others, she realized that her own pain was not just a random occurrence, but part of a bigger purpose. She had discovered how to help others in difficult situations, how to find hope even in the most hopeless circumstances. She no longer feared challenges. On the contrary, she was ready to face them with a smile, because now, she had faith in her heart that everything changes. Her divorce from Nathan was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter in her life. She did not become a victim of circumstances. She became the person who could change her reality. She decided to no longer tie her happiness to other people or events, but to take responsibility for her own life. She understood that change can only begin from within, and now, she was ready to create her future again. This journey of self-healing, forgiveness, and acceptance became a great revelation for Emily. She realized that healing does not begin when you forget the pain, but when you stop allowing it to control your life. She was free, and that was her greatest victory.